Casa Manila in Intramuros is a lifestyle museum that depicts the opulent character of a typical bahay na bato where Hispano-Filipino principalía lived during the late 19th century. Built in 1981, this imposing stone and wood structure is home to the Intramuros Administration's vast array of antiques and religious art collection, curated for tourists who wish to take a nostalgic glimpse into the past. It is located across the historic San Agustin Church and is one of the most popular stopovers for tourists visiting Intramuros. The house itself is said to be a copy of an 1850s ancestral home located originally in San Nicolas, Binondo. Its furniture and furnishings were collected from various old homes and put together to depict how our ancestors went about their day-to-day life. The original architect of Casa Manila was J. Ramon Faustman, who was tapped by then First Lady Imelda Marcos to design this structure as a showcase of Spanish colonial architecture and interiors. In recent years, however, the Intramuros Administration decided that it was time to refurbish Casa Manila. This time, renowned architect and interior designer Juan Anton Mendoza was selected to give the house a much-needed makeover. He worked with social historian and furniture expert Augusto Toto Gonzalez to imbue authenticity to details of the house, from its grand wooden staircase to the homey kaida and sala mayor, to the bedrooms as well as grand spaces in order to regain its magnificence. Señores Mendoza and Gonzalez combed through furniture, ornaments, and fixtures inside the house, replacing misplaced items, especially those not belonging to the era. They also rearranged the furniture and improved the embellishments around the house, ensuring that Casa Manila truly reflects the glory of late 19th century Manila. We are pleased to present the premiere of a short film highlighting the ambitious endeavor of the Intramuros Administration with the help of Anton Mendoza and Toto Gonzalez.
The 24th of June 2021 marks the 450th anniversary of the founding of the Spanish city of Manila by Miguel López de Legazpi in the year 1571. In the opening lines of his immortal play, A Portrait of the Artist as Filipino, National Artist for Literature Nick Joaquin described the vanished Spanish city. Intramuros, the Old Manila, the original Manila, the noble and ever-loyal city. To the early conquistadores, she was a new Tyre and Sidon. To the early missionaries, she was a new Rome. Within these walls was gathered the wealth of the Orient, silk from China, spices from Java, gold and ivory and precious stones from India. And within these walls, the champions of Christ assembled to conquer the Orient for the cross. For 3 centuries, this town was a Babylon in its commerce and a New Jerusalem in its faith. Now look, this is all that's left of it now. Comodo desolada es civitas Dei. What desolation, city of God. And yet, even if war and the inexorable passage of time have changed it forever, that noble and ever-loyal city remains alive in Filipino memory, and in a place that recreates the grandeur of Old Manila, of an Intramuros that is not a hazy dream of the past, but a memory made real in the present. Today, Casa Manila stands as Intramuros' living manifestation, a lifestyle museum that showcases the luxury and grace of a typical house of the Filipino principalía during the late 19th century. It was first built in 1981 to house the vast antiques and religious art collection of Intramuros Administration. Although a modern construction, it is modeled after an authentic ancestral house that originally stood in San Nicolas Binondo. The furnishings are antique, and even some of the flooring and paneling materials come from older houses. Juan Anton Mendoza, a noted architect, interior designer, and heritage advocate, has refurbished this beautiful bahay na bato, which is ready to welcome new guests.
It is time for a paradigm shift. Unlike in Europe, where they like to celebrate victories, we like to celebrate defeats. The fall of Bataan, the Death March, the battle for the liberation of Manila. Intramuros is mostly in ruins. We suffered so much from a devastation we could never recover from. Destruction is what most tours highlight because ruin is everywhere, but not in Casa Manila. The new Casa Manila celebrates the grandeur that was Manila. There's usually an excitement after a long hiatus. When one walks in, one will catch a glimpse of the grandeur that was Manila, in spite of the house having seen better days.
J. Anton Mendoza and Agosto Toto Gonzalez III will now give us a personal tour of this heritage house. Guests who process through the main entrance and ascend its main staircase first find themselves in the entresuelo, or mezzanine. Rooms on this floor were typically occupied by members of the extended family, such as a spinster aunt or a soltero uncle. This is also where the masters of the house would conduct business in the despacho, or office. From the entresuelo, guests would then ascend the wooden staircase to the main floor. A lady ascending these steps would have to carefully lift the long train of her skirt to keep from stumbling. Upon reaching the top of the stairs, she would drop her long skirt, which is what gives this distinctive part of the house its name, kaida, from the Spanish word caer, or to drop. La caida also means the landing.
The kaida is the entrance hall of the house. It is termed such because of the Spanish word caer, meaning to fall. Because this is the area where the ladies let their skirts fall onto the floor, as opposed to having to carry it downstairs because of all the horse, dog, and cat poop on the pavements. The kaida is the area where family life transpired. Here, you had the grandmother doing her darning in one corner. You had the mother and aunts of the house doing their embroidery. You had the master of the house with his friends enjoying cigars and the day's news. You had the daughters playing on the floor. You had the young boys learning how to play board games. And you had everything happening in this room. You also had most of the tertulias here because it was an informal space, an informal and comfortable space. It was usually littered with planters' chairs called butacas, which, when you know how to sit on them, can be the most comfortable chairs invented.
Guests would then come face to face with a portrait of a special lady who watches over Casa Manila, Doña Rafaela Arenas, as painted by Juan Luna.
I would think this is the most important piece in Casa Manila. It is Juan Luna's portrait of Doña Rafaela Arenas, niece of El Excelentísimo Señor Don Ramón Blanco y Arenas, Marqués de Peñaplata y Capitán General de Filipinas. This is actually a facsimile, as the original is presently undergoing full restoration with the Intramuros Administration. And until she returns, I don't think Casa Manila will be complete.
While the caida, or antesala, served as the family's everyday gathering area, special occasions called for something grander. During religious festivals or birthdays or other important occasions, distinguished guests would be entertained in the spacious and elegantly appointed main salon, or sala mayor.
We wanted to bring out the elegance of Intramuros de Manila. Jose Ramon Faustman's architecture is magnificent. All I needed to do was to rearrange and declutter.
The sala was the most important public space in a bahay na bato. According to Filipiniana scholar Martin Tino, this was the room for showing off just how rich you were compared to your peers. It had imported European furniture, it had chandeliers, it had all these luxuries that were meant to show off the wealth of the owner of the house. This room was not open 365 days of the year. It was usually opened only for grand occasions, like the birthdays of the owners and the town fiesta. Here, the room was big enough to host a dance for 20 pairs. It is documented that as far back as the 1870s, we had French seamstresses in Manila who churned out French haute couture for the señoritas and señoras of the city. This was because of the Italian and French opera troupes who would visit Manila periodically. So they brought the art of European fashion to Manila, and our rich señoras and señoritas took to it like ducks to water. During these great occasions, they commissioned fabulous dresses from these seamstresses, and the surprises were only revealed on the day of the ball itself. Thus, we see how Manila was so very social, even in the 1870s.
One of the most popular pastimes was the Tertullia. At these gatherings, family members, their invitados, would play music or recite poetry for the benefit of guests. These were also occasions for trading the latest gossip.
The passage of time has rendered the term Tertullia so strange and so unrelatable to today's young people, the millennials, and even to us, not so old, not so young. But all it really was bonding, except that the media of expression in those days was singing, poetry, and dancing. Even they liked to rehearse the newest dances from Europe. And so with those media of expression, if done in these contemporary times, they'd be sharing about Mobile Legends and Call of Duty. So it was really nothing more than bonding. People would assemble at around 6 o'clock, which was an hour after work, and it would last until about 8 o'clock or even further, depending on how enjoyable it was.
Old Manila always loved tertulias or fiestas, and after everyone has enjoyed the convivial gathering, guests would make their way through the pasillo or corridor to comedor or the formal dining room.
This was the formal dining room, reserved for special occasions. It was a status symbol to have long tables made of one piece of wood, or mesas de sola pieza. These chairs are reproductions of the hardwood chairs that would have been used in the 19th century, because original chairs from that time are rather difficult to come by, as much of them were burned and destroyed during the Japanese occupation and the liberation of Manila. Very few Manileño families were able to save their furniture. These rather interesting large cloth fans on a frame hanging from the ceiling are called punkas. During the meal, a servant would stand here on the side and pull this cord to make the punka swing back and forth. This was supposed to keep the flies from landing on the ceiling or bothering the guests.
There was a turducken mentality to the dishes served. Everything was processed, combined, and recombined. The more complicated the dish, the more carbon footprinted it was, the better. An affluent menu would have started with soup, and it could have been a sinigang na ulang, which would have featured huge river prawns, soured by kamyas, and then it would have been followed by a beautiful steamed apahap, a river bass, which should have been something like 2 feet long, served in a beautiful porcelain dish. And it would have been served with a beautiful homemade mayo of olive oil and egg yolks. It would be followed by a gorgeous pastel of agachonas, these snipes, these rare birds which were found in the foothills of the provinces. They were cooked adobo style, and they were really a treat. And of course, no Filipino dinner is complete without a dead pig in the middle, okay? There was lechon. And another star dish was called cabeza de jabali. or head cheese, which was essentially in France a stuffed boar's head. Don't let that intimidate you. I've had cabeza de jabali, and you know what it is? It's nothing but cold sisig with jelly. Dessert was rich, and you usually had tocino del cielo, which was 1 duck egg per piece. You had the suspiros de amor, which was a meringue. And surprise of all surprises, they had the form of a pavlova torte, in the sense that there were meringue layers filled with fruits and garnished with syrups. And to add to desserts, if you were truly loaded, you had sorbet or even ice cream, usually made from native fruits, but sometimes from canned fruits from Spain and the United States. So you see, the cuisine of late 1800s Philippines was very sophisticated and could measure up to any grand European household. During the late 1800s, rich Filipinos adhered to the then fashionable Victorian dining traditions. So you had the host leading the lady guest of honor into the dining room, followed by the hostess leading the gentleman guest of honor into the room, followed by all the other guests. And these were usually seated alternately, lady, gentleman, lady. Because the dinner service was rather complicated, be it English or Russian, there was a need for a lot of servants in the comedor or dining room. And much of the time, the ratio was 1:1, or perhaps even more. But one peculiarity of those times was that there were always religious people invited, as well as government officials. So it was not strange for one to be seated beside the Archbishop of Manila, to be seated by the Governor General or by the Vice Governor General, to be seated beside the Prior of Santo Domingo, or the Prior of San Agustin, or the Prioress of Santa Catalina and Santa Clara. The presence of the religious in those days was considered a great privilege and a blessing to the household. So they were always honored guests during great occasions.
To keep everything running smoothly for the masters of the house and their guests during these parties, scores of domestics would work frantically behind the scenes. Here in the kitchen, they are hard at work preparing food, cleaning the precious dishes and silverware, and allowing them to dry on the banguera or wooden dish rack before putting them away in the cabinet.
The lifestyle of Spanish Manila is still evident in today's Manila. The concept of Intramuros still exists to this day. The villages of Makati, for instance, are the Intramuros of today. Affluent communities protected by high walls, the Guardia Civiles of Spanish Manila are now the security guards. The cocineros, jardineros, manicuristas, drivers, and extra help still come in the morning and leave at sundown. Gates are closed at 10 p.m. It hasn't really changed much, has it?
Casa Manila is an experience, and even for just one brief visit, it takes you back to a Manila where elegancia and palabra de honor were the norm, and business deals were closed with a mere handshake.
The past is not only behind us, it surrounds us. Until the next time, the stately and sumptuous rooms of Casa Manila quietly wait to welcome us again, to a place that will always be, as Nick Joaquin wrote,
The Manila of our affection.